time is convert this to an MP4, and then I'll send you a link in your email. That seems to take a lot less time to get it to you guys as opposed to uploading it to Moodle, which takes forever. It's a very long time. Anyway, so this will be uploaded, or I'll send you, so please pay attention to your email. You'll have a link next day or so. Well, by tomorrow sometime, we'll have a link with, or a link to a YouTube page, and we'll have this review as well as the presentation. And Katrina, are you with us?
Yeah.
You're presenting today, right?
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, cool. So you present right after. Is anyone else presenting today? Okay, so you're. Who's that?
I mean, I have a presentation, but it's not like completely finished.
Well, I don't tell you, Jordan. If you want to present today, you can present today. But if not, then that window's closed and you need to write the paper. Okay?
Yeah.
So your call. So let's just start with the nuts and bolts. So you guys made it to the end. Congratulations, we're here. You should be finishing up that final module on the business ethics stuff. I have a rating in there from, or excerpts from Pope John Paul II. He talks about work, sustainable community stuff. So if you haven't finished that, make sure you do finish that before taking this test. The test itself is cumulative. However, the majority of exam questions covers everything from what was it? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. My headphones stopped working for some reason. Anyway, if you guys, if I stop again, just raise your hand so I know. So did you guys hear about the first exam already? I mean the multiple choice?
No.
All right, so I'll go through one more time. So the multiple choice is cumulative. However, the majority of the questions come from the second half of the class. So all the stuff from poverty up until including business ethics. Quite a few questions on poverty, especially on abortion and euthanasia. So know those well. But you also see questions from the first part of the course, the notes on the religious leaders, know about Gandhi, those are part of this course. In addition to Gandhi, be aware of who Malcolm X was, and from that first lecture, review that first lecture, and in particular, different ethical theories. Okay? Then you have your second part of the exam. Your second part of the exam is your essay exam. I sent you essay topic questions, and one of which is actually presentation. So you may have a question on a presentation. You only have one, possibly two today. So please pay attention to those presentations. Take notes on those presentations. At the very least, if you have to go after a review and you cannot stay, make sure you do review this file that I'll send to you. Okay? So you'll have 25 minutes for the essay exam, just like your last exam, and you'll have 50 minutes for the multiple choice / true false. Okay, it's open book, open note, so just make sure you're prepared. So any question on the nuts and bolts of the exam itself? Okay, so just like your other exams, and I'm sure you'll all do great. Most of you are doing very, very well, so keep up the good work. I'm working through your papers now, so I'll hopefully have them done probably the beginning of next week. Okay? Actually, I have to do this really long training on Monday and Tuesday, so unfortunately, probably the middle of next week. So that's going to take all day. Anyway, let's turn to your questions now. So what questions do you have for me? Anything you want me to go over?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Can't see you though, Jordan.
I'm Dina.
Oh, Dina, I'm sorry. Well,
I don't know what
Jordan.
maybe.
Oh, there you are, Jordan. Jordan, you're all black. But Dina,
Yeah.
I can hear and see you. So Dina, you're up first.
Is dying with dignity the same thing as euthanasia?
So, we'll backtrack a second. So dying with dignity is usually an argument that is used to justify active euthanasia, or what I call, and what most legal scholars and bioethicists call, physician-assisted suicide. Okay, it's really important we get the terminological clarity. We don't confuse physician-assisted suicide with withholding or withdrawing life support. Okay, so dying with dignity is an argument that's used to justify physician-assisted suicide. The justification is usually along the lines of, I define my dignity as being, pain-free, or as little pain as possible. Dying causes a lot of pain. Ergo, I should be in control of my death, and I shouldn't have to wait until, I die of natural causes, which may be excruciating pain, which may include excruciating pain. Therefore, I want to end my life on my own terms before the pain begins. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we're on euthanasia. Any questions about euthanasia? So, yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on with my video. I think I dropped my laptop, so that's not really working. But sorry. So,
Okay.
what is like burdensome treatment? So like extraordinary treatments. I was kind of.
Sorry for cutting you off.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's a really good question and really good point. So in that lecture on euthanasia, the lecture is really broken into two parts. The first part is the debate over physician-assisted suicide, which is also called active euthanasia. And then the second part looks at withholding or withdrawing life support, which is sometimes called passive euthanasia. Withholding or withdrawing life support is perfectly legal in this state. You do have the right, especially if you're terminally ill and you're an adult, you have the right to tell your doctor you do not want to be resuscitated. You do not want certain medical interventions, okay? So the question then is, well, and this is more of an ethical question as opposed to a legal question. But the question is, not all treatments are the same. When, particularly coming from a Christian tradition, although you'll find this in the Jewish as well as Islamic traditions, and to an extent the Hindu traditions, when are we allowed to take away life-sustaining treatments? So from the Christian and particularly Catholic perspective, they would argue when it's an extraordinary means. So you're not morally required. So for all the major, especially the Western religions, and even outside of Western religion, just in secular society, people value life. When can we let people die? Let nature take its course? Well, the answer that most people will have, and certainly you'll find this in the Christian traditions, is that when it's an extraordinary means, not required to go through burdensome treatment. A burdensome treatment, for instance, a few years ago, there was a young girl named Jahai McMahon. She was declared brain dead, right? So, no reflexes, irreversibly brain dead. And the question is, can you take her off life support? So her heart was still beating because of life support. Her lungs, her organs were still working because of life support. From a Catholic, Christian perspective, and I think most people would say, yes, you can take Jahai off life support because it is an extraordinary means. It's a burdensome treatment, right? We're at the point now with technology that we could keep someone who's brain dead, irreversibly brain dead, alive for weeks, perhaps years, perhaps indefinitely. And so the question is, when can we take them? When can we allow them to die? Well, that's when extraordinary means comes in. When it's an extraordinary means, when it's a burdensome treatment, when you're treating for the sake of treating, when it's not curative. In many cases, there's a great financial toll. It costs a lot of money, and it may have little or no benefits. An extraordinary means could also be, let's say someone has been battling cancer and is at the end of their life, and they just tell their family, no more chemotherapy. I can't do it anymore, right? I mean, that they physically, they psychologically, spiritually can't go through another round of chemotherapy. That chemotherapy would be an extraordinary means. They're not required to go through it. Now, the flip side is ordinary means. What should a hospital be required to do? From the Christian, particularly Catholic perspective, they would say, at the very least, provide for your necessities, such as food, water, maybe even air, certainly shelter, at least food and water, which usually entails a feeding tube and an IV. So whereas you're not required to keep extraordinary means going or to pursue extraordinary means, you are required to pursue ordinary means, okay? However, sometimes there's a blurry area depending upon the situation between ordinary versus extraordinary. But the point I want to drive home is when we're talking about ordinary means, we're not talking about physician-assisted suicide. And the way in which you differentiate the two, one way to differentiate the two is using the doctrine of double effect. But physician-assisted suicide, the physician is actively killing the patient. In terms of taking away at least extraordinary means, you're letting nature take its course. So, Jordan, does that answer your question? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that clears it up.
Great. All right, any other questions?
So with the Pope, so he doesn't support gay marriage, but he accepts them for who they are.
Yeah. So this is yes. Yeah. That's correct.
Okay.
So in that lecture, I go through different Christian perspectives, and I think this is true for any religious group, particularly in this country. There are some Christian traditions that find gay rights, gay marriage to be abhorrent. But what the Catholics are saying is, no, and we love you, we accept you for who you are. We're not called to judge you, right? And we accept you. There's nothing wrong with being gay because this is, you don't choose your sexuality. I mean, we know now that sexual preference is something, or homosexuality, experience of being gay, it isn't something that you freely choose. For the vast majority of people who consider themselves gay or lesbian or even transgender, sexuality is pretty complicated, and the church recognizes that. But the issue is, well, will the church bless the marriage? And the church says no. I mean, we can't, because we have to abide by our teacher, who is Jesus himself. And Jesus talks pretty clearly that in a marriage it has to have a unitive and procreative element to it, and that can only occur between a man and a woman. And so there are it gets complicated, but there are Catholic Christian groups or other Christian groups that, if not looking for it to be married in the church, they'll ask for at least a blessing to bless the marriage. And then you have those who are saying, well, wait a minute, we don't want to get married, but we're going to be the best Catholics we can, and we'll just celebrate together for the rest of our lives. This is a long-winded answer to your question.
No, you're good. Thank you.
Welcome. Great. Anything else? How do you guys like the second part of this course? Easier or not as interesting as the first part?
I like this test better, I think, just because it's more stuff that's like hot topics right now.
Oh yeah. I mean, speaking of hot topics, in that lecture on poverty, there's a little tidbit on healthcare, right? And the cost of it as well as the importance of it. And today in fact, the House passed this replacement bill to replace Obamacare, and now it's moving on to the Senate. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
Can I ask a question for abortion?
Yes.
So can we just go over like the different religions and whether they accept it or not?
Okay. Let me pull it up. Well, so generally speaking, so make the distinction between an indirect versus direct abortion. All of the religious traditions that I go over, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, all of them, all of the major voices of these religions. And you'll find Muslims that agree with abortion. You'll find Buddhists that agree. But in terms of the mainline teachings, they do reject direct abortions. Most would allow for indirect abortions or abortions in specific circumstances. Now, Islam is very interesting because Islam, so in Catholicism, they actually don't have a teaching when ensoulment happens. The Catholics, they don't see a difference. They don't see a real conflict between science and religion, and they agree with the biologists. The biologists say human life begins at conception. The Catholic Church says, okay, but if that's a human life, right, then that child has a right to life, and therefore you cannot kill that child. Under no circumstances can you directly kill the child. But we've also recognized that there are, life is complicated, health is complicated. There are some situations where the mother may need a medical treatment to save her own life, but it will most likely or almost always result in the death of her child. And there's a tough situation. These are situations that the Catholic Church would say are legitimate, and they would call it an indirect abortion. So I'm talking about ectopic pregnancies. Okay? And when you get to Islam, Islam agrees with basically the Catholic position, but it stresses that there's a period called ensoulment. And ensoulment is when God breathes that soul into the human body. Okay, and depending upon which Islamic tradition, it occurs, somewhere between, I think, the 40th, 120th a day of the pregnancy process. So what that means is, although most Muslims don't like abortion, period, they wouldn't have as much a problem with a direct abortion before ensoulment occurs. But once ensoulment occurs, you cannot kill unless the mother's life is in jeopardy. And from an Islamic point of view, the mother is more important than the child. Because the mother, and traditionally Islam, a mother, she's in charge of the household, but she may have other children she has to attend to. So you want to keep her alive if you can, especially if that means to kill a child to save her, then yes. When we get to the Hindu and Buddhist traditions, and my apologies, I'm trying to pull up the website, the lecture, but my internet today is being real cranky. And when we get to the Buddhist and Hindu traditions, the stress there is on karma. Okay? So especially in Buddhism, and this goes back to that lecture on Buddhism. In Buddhism, there is no right and wrong. There is skillful and unskillful actions. Abortion is an unskillful action. Why? Because in Buddhism, there's a cycle of rebirth. And the only way to get off this cycle, to get out of this cycle, is to achieve nirvana. But you can't do that unless you're a human being. This life you have now is the only chance you get at breaking the cycle of karma. So karma, reincarnation, we tend to think it's as a culture like a cool thing, but for Buddhists and Hindus, it's not. Like it's a cycle of suffering and death. You want to get off this cycle. So the point being is, when you abort a child, when you stop a pregnancy, from a Buddhist or Hindu perspective, you are taking away this soul's opportunity to achieve nirvana. You're going to bring upon yourself bad karma. So in a nutshell, they would also take the pro-life position. But with those traditions too, they do make exceptions for cases like the mother's life's in danger, or something along the lines of an indirect abortion. Does that help, Jordan?
Yeah. Can you just define absolute poverty?
Yeah, so there's no analogy here in Buffalo. So when you think of poverty, you might think of people on the streets who sleep out in the parks, and that is a form of poverty. But when we're talking about absolute poverty, what we're talking about are people that are have absolutely nothing. And luckily, we don't see this in this country. If you go to places like Brazil, you have communities that live in garbage dumps. Absolute poverty. They literally live off the garbage of others. And there are millions of people in the world today that live in a state of absolute poverty. They have no state help. Whatever they find in the garbage or whatever they beg and they get, that's their meal for the day. That's what we're talking about absolute poverty. Okay. Good questions. Anybody else?
So what's the difference between poverty of the soul and then poverty of the spirit and material poverty? Is that like just a different type that Christians have?
Not necessarily. Well, I guess from a Christian perspective, you'd say these are the types of poverty that all people experience at some point. Poverty of the soul is basically like depression, right? Poverty of the spirit is what Jesus talks about, to be poor in spirit, which means to be humble. And material poverty is to be poor. not having, it's not absolute poverty. It could be in the lower socioeconomic class, just not having much. So in that example, in that lecture, there's a video of this family in Orlando and how they were affected by the housing crisis. And it's a real tearjerker. It looks at families in general in this country and how they're dealing with poverty. They're experiencing material poverty, not absolute poverty. Okay.
Is the environmental justice chapter basically about you need to take the third world countries into account?
You need, if you say that again, you need to take the
other countries, the third world countries into account. Like
environmental justice. Oh yeah, yes, to an extent, absolutely, yeah, yes. With a business aspect, right, I talk about sustainable community. This is just the idea that, especially when we're looking at like multinational corporations that tend to benefit us, like we don't think about the effect on other countries. We don't think about the effect on the people. So let me give you an example. It's kind of like your cell phone. I would bet you that most of you have a cell phone, and most of you will get a new cell phone in the next year to a year and a half. Where does your cell phone come from? Do you know the injustices, the lack of fair pay that people get, the pollution that happens in the environment in Africa for the minerals that are needed to be mined for your phone. So what sustainable community is essentially, or what this position is essentially saying is, and which is actually the Catholic position, is that you need to look at all things are connected, and you need not simply just look at maximizing profits, but you have to look on the effect of business practices on the community, on the poor in particular, but also on the environment, because we see this, we're seeing this full circle over and over again. Company comes in, and if a company overfishes in an area off South America, it doesn't affect us, right? We actually have more fish, right? But those poor communities that are relying upon the coast, that affects them. It also affects the larger fish that rely on those fish. It creates this whole cycle of problems. Sustainable community means trying to redress those problems, taking more of a holistic approach. And so we're at towards the end of that lecture. And in that reading from Pope John Paul II on labor, he talks about that a little bit too. Okay? Good questions.
It was in the last part of environmental justice. It was the JPII. What is that?
Sorry. That's a reference to John Paul II. So I have that reading on the website. That basically summarizes the important points from that reading.
Okay. Sorry, I was just
go back and change that. No, thank you. I didn't realize that wasn't clear. I have to change that. Anything else? On to our presenter. And just remember to get that full credit for extra credit. I need to hear you today. So for those of you who have not spoken today, if you want that full credit, which I'm more than willing to give you, please ask questions before we. And if all your good questions have already been asked, then stay and ask a question for or on Katrina's presentation.
What did Pope Francis mean about the poor church?
Elizabeth, can you speak up? I don't know. I'm going to get closer to your microphone.
What did Pope Francis mean about the poor church?
Uh-oh. Hold on. Let me make my, sorry.
That's fine.
Let me make my volume. Your volume is very low on my computer. Here we go.
Okay. What did Pope Francis mean about the church?
Oh, about the poor church. Poor, so that's an intellectual and power. Yeah, that's another question. So what he's saying is that the church needs to be a church that not only welcomes the poor, but walks with the poor, right? It's not a church that goes out of it and seeks to be economically prosperous, but it's a church that goes out of its way to help and to be with the poor best they can, right?
Okay.
And so, like, I don't know if you know this, but Rome was a pretty neat place. But what the Pope has done, to give you two examples of this, Rome itself, the Vatican, opens up everything and it lets in homeless people, right? So and all the visitors leave, homeless people come in from all over Rome, and they clothe and give them, places to clean their clothes and a place to sleep. But he actually lives in what amounts to a hotel room, because he insists that I mean, the poor church, and I'm gonna live by example. So he lives basically in a hotel room. And as the Pope, he could live anywhere in, the Vatican, which is, has parts of buildings that are 2,000 years old. Actually, that's not true. It's 1,700 years old. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
I had a question.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Well, yeah. Who's talking now?
Katrina.
Oh, hey, Katrina. There you are. Now it's switched to you.
Okay. Can you just go over the Arizona case?
Oh, the Arizona case. Okay, so this is a complicated case. So, it's actually kind of fascinating about the bioethics ethicists, people concerned about Christian teaching on abortion, because it's a challenging case. And so what happened was, sorry, I'm going to mute all of you for a minute because there's an echo. I don't know if you can hear it, but I can. It's kind of distracting. Oops. All right. So anyway, the Arizona case happened a few years ago in, of course, Arizona, and this young woman was rushed to a Catholic hospital. Okay, so Catholic hospitals, although loosely they abide by Catholic teaching, they certainly do abide by at least one teaching, which is do not kill. So they do not commit abortions. So this woman comes in and she has cardiopulmonary issues, right? But she's in the second month of her pregnancy. Her pregnancy is frustrating this condition to the point where the physicians on staff say, listen, if we don't do something drastic, ergo abort, this child, this is most likely going to kill not only the woman, but also the child. Okay? So they brought together, and by the way, this happens all the time. I mean, there's an ethics committee at every hospital that I know of here in Buffalo. Those of you who work in hospitals, there's definitely an ethics committee there, and I bet you there's a bioethicist somehow related, or an ethicist somehow related to that committee. Anyway, so they call together and they call up the bioethicist on staff who happens to be a Catholic sister, right? Like the Sister Denise or any of the sisters here on campus. She's a woman, celibate woman who dedicated herself to the service of Christ. So she's tasked with the final call on this. It's a tough decision, right? Because number one, we in a maternal fetal conflict, what we're looking at is probability, and the doctors are saying it's highly probable that if we do not abort this child, if we do not abort this pregnancy, we don't end the pregnancy, the mother and child will die. Second complication is it wasn't clear what the woman herself wanted, and she was unable to speak. Right? So that's what, did she want an abortion to occur? would she have wanted an abortion to occur? So Sister McBride, she's tasked with this difficult situation, and she ultimately says, to save the woman's life, we have to abort. And by the way, when we're looking at when you need to abort a child to save the life of the mother, in this country, the usual cases are ectopic pregnancies, which from a Catholic standpoint is not problematic, it's indirect abortion. Or when you have cases like this, you have a pre-existing condition. So pretty much I was asking a physician, like, well, what is, when does that happen? And what he said to me was, if the doctor says to you, don't get pregnant because your body can't handle it for whatever pre-existing condition you have, those are kind of the cases that lead to maternal fetal conflicts. And this was one of those cases. So she ended the pregnancy, okay? And so the question is, did she do the right thing, right? Just by a show of hands, how many of you think she did the right thing? Okay. I see like little hands like this. I like two fingers coming up. How many of you think she didn't do the right thing? No one? No one? All right. So it's a difficult situation, and make it more difficult, this is within the Catholic purview, which rejects direct abortion. So at the end of the day, she aborted when she gave the okay to have the abortion, they aborted the child, and the mother's life was saved. Okay? So the bishop, who is the local ordinary, basically the guy in charge of, so every church, right, going back to Christianity, Christianity traces back to Jesus, but Jesus chose the 12 apostles, and those 12 apostles chose successors, who are called the episcopoi, or in English, bishops. They're still around today, the successors of the apostles. In every state, there's a leading bishop. The leading bishop found out about this in Arizona, and he actually excommunicated Sister McBride for committing a direct abortion. And excommunication means it rarely happens, but it means you're kicked out of the church until you repent. And she actually did repent, and now she's back in good standings with the church. So just so for this exam, just be aware of the complexity of a maternal fetal conflict. And also, if you get this question on the exam, it would be really nice if you could apply the doctrine of double effect. And I will say that within professional Catholic ethicists or Catholic bioethicists, there is somewhat of a split as to whether or not Sister McBride made the right decision. The Catholic bishop, as well as the ethicist who says that Sister McBride made the wrong decision, pointed to the fact that in cases like this woman, there actually was a high probability of her making it through and not only saving her life, but the child's life. So essentially they're saying that Sister McBride overreacted, and that overreaction resulted in the death of the child. On the flip side, people who support Sister McBride, what they say is, you know what, this was a life or death situation. Sister McBride she had the stress on her, all on her. She took it on her own. Well, I've had the ethics committee, and she had it. And she didn't have a lot of time to think about this. And she made the best decision, the best educated decision that she could. In this case, it was to end the pregnancy. Okay, so that's a maternal fetal conflict. Good. Any other questions?
Back to euthanasia.
Hold on a second. Let's have her hand up. Hold on. Let's have her hand up first. Alyssa? Hold on. You're muted. You're unmuted now. Alyssa? Shoot.
Back to euthanasia,
Okay.
like Dina was going to say. So with Brittany Maynard, she chose the physician's-assisted suicide. But, like, with someone with, who chose to sign a DNR and stuff, would they be, like, a lot of religions are against the physician-assisted suicide, So would they be more against that than the signing of a DNR or like refusal of treatment?
No, well, that's a great question. So believe it or not, I just learned this recently that a lot of traditions, and here in Buffalo, a nurse informed me about this. She says she sees Muslim patients come in all the time, and they come in with a DNR, and specifically, they don't want they don't want specific extraordinary treatments, right? They want to totally give themselves to Allah, so they want to prevent this technology from getting in the way of them giving themselves to Allah. So that would be an example of how religion says not only is it okay for you to use a DNR, you should use a DNR because you don't want to frustrate Allah's will. You don't want to mess with Allah. Other traditions, in most traditions that I've looked at, they wouldn't. So like the Catholic tradition. So the Catholic tradition doesn't have a problem with the DNR, but there are. I think it would certainly be more comfortable taking it case by case, because the DNR can't take into account all the situation itself. But certainly there is no formal teaching that's a sin, and I think most Christians would be within that realm. Judaism, Orthodox, conservative, I'm going to guess they would be against it. More Reformed would be okay with it. Buddhism, Hinduism, that's not clear. That's not clear. And the issue there is, so you have two themes, two I guess tensions, especially like a religion like Buddhism. You have the stress on being compassionate, but you also have the stress on karma and the reality that all the suffering in your life is caused by karma. And so the way to get rid of particularly these bad karmas is to suffer, right? So you're expiating the suffering. So I can see how a DNR would be problematic for them as well. Yeah. But in all those religions, they would not consider, well, in most cases, they would not consider a DNR to be anything like physician-assisted suicide, because physician-assisted suicide, you're not denying a treatment, right? You're actively ending a person's life via a poison pill, right, or a lethal cocktail. Okay? Yes, Dina.
I was just going to ask about the morphine. Like, I didn't really understand what that was about.
Yeah. So the reality, well, that's actually difficult to find how many people a year die of overdosing on morphine. But there are some suggestions that there are a lot of people who die in hospitals, criminal people, because of morphine, right? And so the question I asked is, number one, is this a form of euthanasia, like legalized euthanasia? And number two, is it ethical? And that's when I brought in the doctrine of double effect to help you differentiate between when it's ethical to use technologies that end people's lives, and when it's not, at least from primarily a Christian perspective. So looking at morphine, and even legally speaking, look at our legal system. You take religion out of the equation. If you're a nurse and you're giving your patient morphine, you should know that morphine is an opiate, and to get the same level of pain relief, you have to increase the dosage. Well, you get to a point where too much morphine will result in what? Death. It will kill your patient. And particularly at the end of life, where there's a lot of pain, you're giving more and more morphine to this to your patient. Now, if your patient dies, your patient's in a lot of pain and they're asking for more morphine, and you accidentally give them a little too much and they wind up dying from it. Did you murder your patient? Well, legally speaking, we would say no. No. Number one, if you intend it, if you're intending to take away the pain versus intending to kill them, so if you go into a hospital today for those of you who work in a hospital, and there's a patient that really pisses you off, and you decide to up the dosage of the morphine. You press that button until is it a button, nurses? Is it like a button you press? Is that not right? Where are my nursing students? No. I'll have to look into it. But anyway, so if you up the dosage of morphine to the point where you kill your patient, you're intending to kill your patient. Yeah, no, you're going to jail for that. That's murder. But if you're intending to help the patient, and there's nothing wrong with morphine. Morphine's a great drug. In fact, it takes a lot of pain. And this goes back to the four criterion of the doctrine of double effect. We would say that the consequence of taking the lethal dose of morphine, which results in death, is ultimately justified because the intention was good. The act of giving the morphine is, morally indifferent. And because of the circumstance, the person is terminally ill and excruciating pain, it's justified to give them more morphine, even if that morphine results in death. I remember when my sorry to tell you this, but I still remember, it's still etched in my memory when my grandmother was dying. I was about 20 years old, and I just remember her last words. It wasn't pretty. She was a beautiful, beautiful woman, and deeply miss her. But when she died, I remember her. Before she died, I remember calling out for more morphine, right? Like morphine, because she was in such excruciating pain. Death is painful. So the morphine it could be justified in cases like that. So it's different from euthanasia. Okay, but I think the key is in euthanasia. Number one, the goal is to kill the patient, and number two, you're not what ends the pain is not the drug, but death. Okay. Jim, do you have a question? I can return to you.
Yeah. For the business ethics and sustainable community, is that just going to be like a compare and contrast? Like, how's that going to be? Like, how are we supposed to answer that?
I'm going to ask you what it is. I want you to explain it.
Okay.
How does that work? So, in that lecture, I think probably the easiest way to explain that, go into that lecture and you'll see those circles, right? Those concentric circles. And that's essentially what the Pope is arguing. And people who argue for a sustainable community, that's what they're saying. In order to get a sustainable community, yeah, you need businesses, you need an economy that prospers, but you also have to take into account social justice, the poor, racial inequalities, whatever. You're going to make sure, do your best to make sure the community benefits, not just for people, but also look at the environment. Well, what is the environmental cost of what you're trying to do? Okay, and so if you can balance all that, or trying to achieve a balance will result in a sustainable community, or at least kind of get you in the direction of getting a sustainable community. Any other questions? Yes, Eric.
Could you explain poverty of the spirit for just poverty?
Yeah. So poverty of the spirit. So I talked about those three types of poverty. And poverty of the spirit is basically the positive poverty. So that term comes from Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew, in the Beatitudes. He talks about this whole notion of to be poor in spirit. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit. What does that mean, to be poor in spirit? It basically means to be humble, right? To the reality that you need little. You don't need things, right? You're not controlled by your possessions. You control your possessions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. It was one of the three that confused me.
Yeah. Cool. Right. So we're about an hour. Is there anything else you want to ask me? Good questions. Going once, going twice. So why don't we turn now to Katrina's presentation? And if a question pops up that you want me to answer before we leave tonight, then after Katrina's presentation, why don't you ask it, okay? So Katrina, are you ready? So what I need you to do now, Katrina, is open up your PowerPoint or whatever you're presenting, and then on your screen, you'll see a button called Quick Start, a tab. And within that tab, you'll see like a little button that says Share Screen. It's like an arrow in it, I think. You want to click on your Share Screen. Let me get my board. Okay, I'm back. All right, are you able to share the screen, Katrina?
I don't really see what you were talking about.
So there's you see your WebEx screen, right?
Yeah.
There's a button called Quick Start.
Okay.
Click on that. And then in the middle, towards the bottom, there's a button. There, you got it.
Is
All right.
it recording?
You're good to go. And so go to the slideshow and just, you know what to do from here.
Yeah. Okay, so my presentation is on Hinduism and animal testing. So just a review of what Hindus believe. From our notes, I have ahimsa is the absence of mental intention of injuring, harming, disturbing, and agonizing the opponent. So again, thinking back to how Hindus live their life and are so for the rights of living things, not just human beings, animals. And this really stood out to me when I was reading through the lectures and the readings that we had on how passionate they are about animals. So again, getting back to our notes, I had found that it said that cows are the basis of nonviolent ethics and should be protected because they are not food but a source of life, and the rights of all living things from freedom and violence. So you can kind of gear towards what they're going to be thinking about animal testing. They cannot be cruel or inhumane to any living being, and karma, samsara, ahimsa allowed for animal ethics to occur more than 5,000 years ago under this religion. So even before we had all these laboratories and all that, Hindus still believed in animal rights way back before any of this occurred. So then once I was researching, I found this long saying that I can't really say that good, but it's Vastuhiva Kutumbakam, and the Hindus refer to this as the world is one family. So again, animals and humans, we're all under the same level of rights. We all deserve the same amount of respect. And they believe that not only is the person causing the harm at fault to these animals, but also the one not preventing it. So it's kind of like how people view bullying today, whereas if you see the wrong happening, even if you're not the one, you know, abusing these animals, testing on them, you're still at fault for not trying to stop it or protesting it. And then just like a little food for thought, Hindus, I found, are the largest population of people that actually follow a vegetarian lifestyle. And again, vegetarian, you don't eat meat, you don't believe in the killing of animals for food, so right along with the Hindus' animal rights idea. And then again, I mentioned before, all animals should be treated with respect by humans because they are equals under existence, which is what the Hindus believe. And I found this quote from Gandhi saying that the greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated.
So before even moving into that, obviously I found that Hindus are against animal testing, any form of animal abuse, but what exactly is animal testing? So it's the utilization of lives other than humans for experimentation purposes. So in 1938, the United States Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act legally required testing on animals for certain projects. These subjects included dogs, rats, mice, cows, pigs, goats, guinea pigs, cats, rabbits, birds, fish, etc. And there's actually 115 million documented cases of animals that were subjected to this animal testing. And the kinds of things they were put under were to test things like medications, cosmetics, chemicals, pesticides, fragrances, vaccines, cleaning products, medical procedures, and the list just goes on. And the different ways that they do this testing, I found, are either by injection, force feeding, radiation exposure, surgery, inhalation, emotion-evoking situations, skin body application. And the different ways that they apply these, for example, would be how they use calves for surgical heart valve practice and for medical students. And they actually do this right here in our backyard at the UB North campus. Dogs, rats, guinea pigs are all used for eye cosmetic formula testing. So when you go to Walmart and buy your makeup, you can look on the back and see it'll actually say, you know, not tested on animals or cruelty-free. Birds are used in vaccine development and research studies. Fish are used to test chemical toxicity. And pigs are used in xenotransplantation. So you can actually get a pig heart or a pig valve in your own body, and they found that out by taking the pigs in a lab and doing these transplantations with their organs. And then goats are used in gene experimentation. So here I have a picture from the Time magazine of Dolly, and that was the famous sheep who was created in a gene cloning lab. So right there you have an animal who was created in a scientific lab, messing with the way animals are and everything. So again, all that being said, now having a better idea of what exactly animal testing is, Hindus, I found, are very, very against any sort of animal testing because they find that it is so inhumane to do to these beings that are also lives just like how human lives are. So if you are of Hinduism religion or are just against animal testing, some negatives to it would be that they are viewed as cruel and inhumane to do to innocent animals who do not have the choice to subject their bodies to experimentation. These animals are not human beings, so test results may be inaccurate or similar enough to relate back to humans. So, for example, if you have a drug that's safe for animals, it doesn't necessarily mean it's always safe for humans. So you can have a drug that passes and does the right effect for an animal, but not one for a human. It can have the complete opposite effect, or even not do anything at all and just be useless. Some people also consider it an easy way out to furthering research for a better cure for a product, because they find that you can possibly further your research and try to find another way, a better way, a safer way that doesn't involve harming anybody, any life. Animals are given no rights as to what is or could be done to them. Again, the whole animals don't have a voice conflict. These are very costly and take away from the overall research budget. So you're spending money on maintaining these animals, maintaining their health, just to keep them alive for the research part of the aspect. That's all going to add up, whereas if you put in all that money into the actual research and finding out whatever you're testing. The things that they do to these animals, they find that are horrific abuse if you did these same things to a human. So, for example, if they want to test a cosmetic product, like, say, an eye makeup, they'll take the formula and actually take a needle, sorry, this is kind of graphic, and inject it into a rabbit's eye with the needle without any numbing or anything. And obviously, nobody would ever think to do that to a human being. So obviously, that would be abuse. And there's no documented medical breakthroughs that were discovered with animal testing involved. Statistic that I have that 94% of drugs that pass animal tests fail in human clinical trials. So again, it's not always the accurate way to go. To a Hindu religion, they would also believe this. But if you don't follow that faith and are for animal testing, you might say that potential for life-saving medications or treatments. And there may be no other options because testing on an intellectual human being is not ethical, like how we said before. When notable suffering is involved, you wouldn't stick a needle in a human's eye, so who else would you do it on? Possibility for benefit of other animals or the animal itself. So the animal may even improve if they have a condition going on. Like if a pig has a bad heart valve, maybe they'll have a good heart if they get a replacement done, just experimentally. Many animals have very similar characteristics of the human body, so it may be the closest body to a human that research can access. Many animals have shorter lifespans than human beings, and this will help to ensure safety and injury prevention on humans. The risk-benefit factor is that the amount of people being spared outweighs the amount of animals that are actually being sacrificed. And I had gotten this quote from a veterinary magazine, actually, that all veterinary medicines available to us today have been developed and tested using animals. So the medications that actually save animals are tested on animals to begin with. And I have some quotes from Hindu texts to support their views towards testing on animals and their negativity towards it. So, he who kills harmless and nonviolent creatures for his own pleasure will never get true happiness, whether in this life or after he dies. Deer, camel, donkey, monkey, rats, creeping animals, birds, and flies. One should consider them like one's own children and not differentiate between one's children and these creatures. He who does not seek to kill, cause pain, or tie up living creatures and desires the good of all attains everlasting joy. And the last one is, he should not satiate his hunger and thirst without first giving water and grains to his animals. So again, animals, the Hindus are considered equals and should never be sacrificed to this treatment. And Hindus are very, very passionate about the cow. Again, from our notes, they embrace the life of the cow. And these are just some tests on animals and some cosmetics. And I wanted to bring up the point that when I was researching, I found that the European Union, Norway, Israel, and India announced a national ban on all testing and experimentation on animals, and that was in 2014. They announced this national ban in those countries. And Australia and New Zealand are actually considering this ban as well. And those are the sources I had.
Great. Great job, Tina. Great presentation, but so I have two questions for you first. We'll take questions from the class afterwards. So you mentioned, I lost you there for a second, but something about veterinarians, they test their medications on animals. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this magazine, I was looking up.
How does that help your argument, though? Like
positives to it that Hindus wouldn't agree with, but these are the views that why it occurs.
But did you say before, in the slide before, that there's never been a case where benefits have occurred due to animal testing? That's what confused me, Or did you mean benefits for people? I'm not really sure. Which is
Okay, so I think you're viewing to this slide,
maybe
negatives. It says, I think you're talking about, are you talking about the statistic?
yes.
Okay, so when drugs are tested, they're tested or they're progressed to people. So if drugs pass animal testing, they don't always pass human testing. But, you know, sometimes never make to that point. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not. I can go.
There are that's different than animal trials for animals, right? But so I got one more question for you. So right now there's a new technology out. Okay, so there's a crisis here in this country for organ donors. There's like 100,000 people or more that need organs. So what these scientists have done, they could take your cells and take out your stem cells, and they can grow your organ that you might need. And they can grow it in, let's say, a pig, right? So they can actually grow that heart or liver you need in that pig. And when it's ready, when it's full grown, at least in theory, they'll slaughter the pig and give you that organ, right? How do you think a Hindu might feel about that?
Well, I personally think a Hindu would not agree with that, because when I was researching, I found that, and there was this one website that I got a lot of information about Hindus' view on animal ethics. Let me see if I can find it here. From this website right here, that talked about how Hindus believe that, again, that all animals, no matter the condition, it's kind of along the lines of the whole abortion thing, where all life is considered sacred. And if you have these cells that you're growing and you put them into this pig, that's now those pig cells. So it would be wrong, in the Hinduistic view of it, is that would be wrong to kill that pig, because that's a part of them now. That's their life. So you're sacrificing that pig for a human life, which it's not really, I mean, you're picking one life over the other. According to this slide, animals should be treated with respect by humans because they are equals under existence. So I think that, I know that Hindus would not believe that is right.
And what do you think?
Well, I mean, I know I'm not supposed to be biased on this whole thing. I personally don't believe in animal testing, and I actually went out to the store after researching all this because I didn't really know that much before about this, and then when incorporate animal testing, I was like, oh, well, that might be like an interesting thing to see what their views on it would be, since they're so embraceful of animal life. So I went out and I went to like Walmart just to see if they had like any kind of makeup things that were, you know, cruelty free, and there actually is stuff. So I agree with it from all the information that I found. I just thought it was
awesome.
disgusting.
Great job. So, any questions from anyone in the room? Or I guess in your room. Well, I guess you kind of are in my room, because you're in my screening room. Any questions for? Oh, is anyone else presenting today?
No.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, any questions for me about the exam? Well, homeschooling twice. All right. Well, then I will let you guys go. I will stop the recording now, and I'll try to have this posted sometime early tomorrow, so you can review anything you want to review, especially Katrina's awesome presentation. So good job, guys. Thanks for a great semester. I will work on those papers middle of next week, and then I'll work on those essays. So hopefully have your grades updated in a week and a half. So please look over your grades. If you haven't already, look over your modal grade. The grade you see there will be the grade that you see on your transcripts. Okay? All right, well, have a great night and God bless. All right. And then after everyone goes,